She thought it was just a joke, except that jokes scarred a man for life and sparked nationwide outrage. Now, where name is everyone's lips for all the wrong reasons, justice is coming, and Karen's nightmare has only just begun. But let's start from the top. No. Karen Westmore, aged 32, lived in her own version of reality. You know, the type always walking around like they own the air you're breathing. Karen wasn't just a big shot at some corporate offices. She made sure everyone knew it. People didn't just work for her. No, in her head, they existed to worship her like she was some kind of business queen, and if you didn't bow well, you were either afraid of her or jealous simples. So when Karen decided to take her two besties, Brittany and Rachel, on a royal tour of the historic district, the drama practically wrote itself. The place was buzzing with tourists snapping pictures of the ceremonial guards in their Shin uniforms. These guys had a reputation for standing perfectly still. No matter what, it was a weirdly impressive skill to everyone else. They looked dignified, but not to Karen. Look at these guys' statues with brick face. She whispered to Brittany, who nearly choked on her lat from laughing. Rachel snorted, probably just for show. Karen smirked, already feeling the itch to take things to the next level, for her life was a game. And today's challenge was breaking the legendary focus of these guards. It wasn't enough that they stood there in silence. Karen wanted them to crack, and she wasn't about to settle for boring old heckling. No, she needed something spectacular. That's when Harriez landed on the small bottle in her bag, industrial-grade surface cleaner, the stuff she'd accidentally taught along after a weekend of cleaning her vacation house. You could practically hear the gear stirring in her mind. Girls, watch this, Karen whispered, her tone dripping with mischief. What are you doing? Rachel said, half laughing, half worried. Oh, relax, it's just a joke with a fake regal flair. Karen strutted up to one of the guards, a young guy, probably older than 25. His name tag read Eric Thompson. Not that she bothered to notice. He stood, the eyes locked on some distant point like a statue, carved from marble. His face was expressionless, but Karen hated that in her world. I ignored her. Hey, statue, you boy, she called out, waving dramatically. Eric didn't flinch, not even a twitch. Karen clicked her tongue in mock disappointment. Wow, tough crowdy, you know, a smile wouldn't kill you, still not thing. Oh, he was good, too good. Smirk twisted into something darker. Okay, time for plan B. Shep pulled out the bottles, shook it playfully and giggled. This was going to be hilarious. All right, Royal Guard, time to wake up, she shouted before splashing the liquid straight at his face. Their action was immediate. Eric let out a guttural scream. Stu, mumbling backward, Asha clawed his face, the sound through the air. Like a siren, the crowd around them froze for a moment as if noon could process what had just happened. Then all hell broke loose. People screamed, a woman yelled for someone to call an ambulance. Tourists scrambled to get away, their phones shelled high, torqued every second. Karen, she just stood there, her mouth slightly open. This wasn't their action she'd expected. She thought they'd flinch, maybe curse either for ruining his uniform, but this was bad. Eric fell to his knees, writhing in agony, as the liquid burned his skin. His face contorted in a way that made Karen's stomach twist. For the first time in her life, she didn't have a snarky come back at it. Was a joke, she whispered, as if saying it out loud would undo what had just happened. But the words felt hollow to her. The crowd wasn't buying it. People glared at her like she was a monster. Brittany and Rachel were nowhere to be found. Vanished. These second things went south. Karen was left alone, surrounded by chaos, and for the first time she felt something she never thought she'd feel: fear. Real, paralyzing fear. A siren BL stared in the distance. Karen finally realized the truth. This wasn't just a prank gone wrong. This was her nightmare, and it had only just begun. Karen woke up to a chorus of buzzing notifications. At first she thought it was just another typical morning emails, maybe a few calendar reminders, but none of these cons. She grabbed her phone and unlocked the screen. It hit her like a freight train. Her name was plastered everywhere: news headlines, social media, trending hashtags, and the video. Oh, that cursed video. Some random guy had caught the entire scene yesterday and uploaded it TK by sunrise. It had gone viral faster than wildfire in the desert. She hesitated for a moment, then tapped on the video. There she was, front and center, Smuga Sever throwing that splash the camera had even picked up. Eric's agonizing scream, the kind of sound that echoed in nightmares. The caption read, "This is what privilege looks like. Unbelievable." The comment section was a war zone. She better end up behind bars, no excuses. So Hajoke, are you serious? That's beyond cruel. Congrats. Karen of the year, we finally know your name. Karen's hands trembled as she scrolled. It wasn't just random trolls, verified accounts were talking about it. Major influencers were weighing in her face, had become the symbol of everything wrong with entitled behavior. And the worst part, there was no way to spin this. The world had seen her for what she was before she could fully process the fallout. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was work, an emergency meeting. With her boss great, just what she needed, Karen stormed into the office dressed like she was still in control, crisp blazer, designer heels, classic boss lady energy. But the atmosphere was suffocating, no cheerful greetings from coworkers, no polite smiles. It was like walking into a courtroom where everyone already knew the verdict in the conference room. Her boss, Mr. Donovan, sat at the head of the table. His usual charming demeanor was gone, replaced by a cold, almost predatory glare. Karen tried to play it cool, but her confidence was cracking fast. Karen, he began, his voice like ice. What the heck did you dope in her mouth, but cut her off. No, seriously, I need you to explain to me how you thought that was a good idea. Reporters calling clients, threatening to pull contracts, and our brand being dragged through the mud. This is a PR disaster of epic proportions. Karen forced a smile, hoping to diffuse the tension. Look, it's all a misunderstanding. The media is blowing it out of proportion. I didn't mean to. Fee held up a hand. I don't care what you meant. The fact is you're the face of the scandal. Now we can't afford to keep you on board. Karen froze. Wait, you're firing me? Fiv immediately, he confirmed. Clean out your desk. Security will escort you out. And just like that, it was over. The career she'd spent years building gone in one humiliating meeting. But Karen's nightmare didn't end there. By the time she got home, a small crowd had gathered outside her house. Protesters, they held signs that read "Justice for Eric" and "Stop Karen's Violence." As some chanted slogans, others recorded her every move, waiting foe. Randy Signa for Morse. Her phone wouldn't stop ringing. News stations, random strangers, and even former friends all wanted a piece of her. To make matters worse, someone had leaked her address online. People were calling for her to face justice in their own twisted ways. Karen locked the doors and shut all the blinds, her mind racing. How had things spiraled this far? Desperate, she called her lawyer, a highly paid newsman named Mr. Jacobs. Surely he'd know how to fix this. Karen, he sighed after hearing her out. I won't sugarcoat it. This is bad. Public opinion's already against you. Out, he video evidence is damning, and the victim's family is pushing for maximum legal consequences. You need to prepare for the worst. But it was a mistake, she protested. It wasn't supposed to go this fair. It doesn't matter what you intended, he replied bluntly, and intent doesn't erase impact. You've got a long road ahead. Karen hung up, feeling like the walls were closing in. No job, no allies, an reputation that had gone up in flames overnight. How was she supposed to survive this? Meanwhile, Eric Thompson lay in a hospital bed fighting for his future. The acid had done serious U.S. damage, and the doctors had worked tirelessly to save what they could, but part of his face was permanently scarred. His once bright, hopeful eyes now reflected a deep pain that no surgery could erase. Reporters swarmed outside the hospital, eager for any updates. So eventually, Eric's mother agreed to speak on his behalf. In an artful interview, she said, "My son was just doing his job. He didn't deserve this. Now his life will never be the same." The clip aired on every major network, further cementing Karen's role as the villain. Donations poured in for Eric's recovery. Strange Ers from across the country sent messages of support, offering everything from financial help to emotional encouragement. The world was rallying around him. Karen, on the other hand, was becoming a ghost. Noon wanted to hear her side of the story, and deep down she knew why. The courthouse was a circus. Hundreds of people had gathered outside, holding signs, shouting slogans, and snapping photos. Some held up posters that read "Justice for Eric," while others simply screamed insults at Karen as she was escorted through the crowd. Monsters, someone yelled from the back, ugly on the inside and out. Another voice chimed in. Karen tried to keep her head down, but the tension in the air was suffocating. Her lawyer, Miss Jacobs, walked beside her, whispering under his breath, "Karen, stay calm. Do not engage with anyone." Easy for him to say. He wasn't the one being crucified. The court of public opinion. As they entered the building, the noise outside didn't seem to fade. It followed her like a storm cloud. The echoes of outrage ringing in here. Every step she took, heavier than the last. By the time she reached the courtroom, her legs were trembling. Inside, the courtroom was packed. Journalists lined the back rows, and Eric's family sat in silence, their faces cold and unrelenting. Karen wouldn't even look in their direction. The prosecutor, a sharp-eyed woman named Miss Rivera, wasted no time taking controls. She rose from her seat, addressing the judge with the kind of authority that could make anyone sweat. Your Honor, this was not just an accident. This was an act of cruelty and arrogance, she began, her voice calm but cutting. Karen Westmore showed complete disregard for another human being's safety. And now, because of her, Eric Thompson's life has been irreversibly changed. Ask for the maximum sentence. Karen's heart pounded as Rivera continued laying out every detail of the incident. The video footage was played against the scene or replayed in agonizing slow motion. Karen cringed as she watched, her laughing, oblivious to the nightmare she was about to create. The room was silent except for the audio of Eric's scream echoing through the speakers. It was impossible to escape. The prosecutor called her first witness, an eyewitness who had been in the crowd that day. He stepped forward and cleared his throat. I saw the whole thing. He said she was joking around, acting like it was all some game she didn't care about. What she was doing until it was too late. Honestly, it was disgusting to watch. Karen clenched her fists under the table. This isn't fair. They don't understand it wasn't supposed to be like this. Finally, it was her turn to speak. Her lawyer gave her a reassuring nod, though it did little to steady her nerves. She stood trying to appear composed, but her voice shook as she began. It was a mistake, she stammered. I didn't mean to hurt anyone. I thought it was just water, is where I never intended. Miss Rivera interrupted with a raised eyebrow. Thought it was water you were carrying in Austrial cleaner in your bag. Are you seriously asking this court to believe you didn't know what you were doing? Karen froze, words failing her. The jury's expression said it all. They weren't buying it, not one bit. It didn't take long for the jury to reach a verdict. The four-person stood delivering the word that sealed Karen's fate. Guilty. Karen felt the floor drop out from under her. The judge's voice droned on, announcing the sentence. Karen Westmore, you're hereby sentenced to 5 years in prison in order to pay full compensation for the victim's medical expenses. 5 years. Her whole world crumbled in an instant as the bailiff LED Haraway. She could hear murmur of satisfaction from the crowd. Eric's mother wept, softly holding her husband's hand. The media had already begun typing out headlines. This would be front-page news by evening. Prison was a whole new nightmare. Word of Karen's crimes spread quickly among the inmates, and it wasn't long before she became a target. The prisoners didn't care about her excuses to them. She was just another privileged person who thought she was above consequences. Karen had to watch her back constantly, every shadow in the hallways feeling like a threat. The days blurred together, long, cold, and filled with paranoia. Meals were tensico. Envers where few at night. She lay awake in her tiny cell, haunted by the sound of Eric's scream. There was no escaping it. Meanwhile, Eric's story continued to gain national attention. His recovery was slow, but support poured in from across the country. Fundraisers were held in his honor, and a non-profit organization even offered to cover his long-term care. He became a symbol of resilience, a survivor who refused to let tragedy define him one day. Karen received a letter. It was from Eric's mother. Her hands shook as she opened it, unsure of what to expect. The message inside says short but devastating. I hope you have enough time to realize that jokes can destroy lives. Karen sat on the edge of her bunk, rereading the sentence over and over. For once, as she had no response, no excuses, just silence.